Take your spoiled little act and go to hell. Graham snapped across the courtroom, loud enough for the clerk to stop typing before the judge lifted her eyes. I kept both hands flat on the table. The same hands he used to mock whenever my work left them cracked from steam. Die. An old upholstery thread. Celeste Arden sat 2 rows behind him in a cream dress, her gold watch catching the courtroom lights like she had come to watch paperwork bury me. Bennett Rhodes touched Graham's sleeve too late, because the insult had already landed, and Judge Rosalind Fairchild had already opened the sealed probate file. The room did not freeze because my husband had yelled at me. Men like Graham had raised their voices in smaller rooms for years and called it stress. It froze because Judge Fairchild read the first page, paused over my name, then looked from Graham to the vendor schedule attached behind it. Mr. Whitlock, did you sign the 2024 renewal agreement with Briarloom Supply House in your role as Regional Operations Director? Graham's face held its shape for 1 second too long before he answered. Yes, Your Honor, but that has nothing to do with this divorce. Judge Fairchild turned one more page, and Bennett leaned closer to Graham with the sudden urgency of a man realizing his client had skipped a confession. It appears Briarloom Supply House transferred 68% membership interest to Meredith Knox through inheritance. She read, her voice level enough to make every word heavier. Celeste lowered her phone into her lap, and that small movement told me more than any apology she could have manufactured after the hearing. She had known enough to sit there smiling, but not enough to understand the document that had just entered the record. The judge continued, reading the probate certification and the $1,280,000 in distributions released from escrow into an account bearing only my name. Graham's mouth opened, then closed, and I watched the color drain from his face in careful stages, like truth was leaving no room for performance. Bennett stopped touching his sleeve, stopped smiling at April Maddox, stopped pretending the $300 monthly settlement offer had been generous instead of timed. I did not look victorious. I looked at my hands, at the work Graham had mistaken for weakness, and understood the room had finally learned their value. Judge Fairchild set the document down and asked why Graham's company email referenced Meredith's connection to Elaine Porter and Briarloom before his divorce filing. April did not stand dramatically. She simply slid Exhibit F forward, and the paper made a soft sound that cut cleaner than shouting. Graham whispered my name as if the right tone might pull me back into the woman he had priced at $300 a month. I did not answer, because the court record was speaking now, and for once, Graham Whitlock had to listen. Before the file ever reached Judge Fairchild's bench, my life had already been measured in fabric dust, unpaid patience, and Graham's quiet calculations. I restored antique chairs, velvet headboards, linen panels, and torn banquet seating for Austin hotels that charged more per night than my old rent. My hands knew silk from imitation before my eyes confirmed it, because real work teaches the body what people like Graham only pretended to know. He used to look at those hands across our kitchen table and call my job rich people's couch repair, smiling like cruelty became harmless when polished. When I married Graham Whitlock, he was already skilled at making confidence look like competence, especially around people who confused charm with character. He managed regional operations for boutique hotels, shook hands beautifully, remembered wine preferences, and made every stranger believe he was generous before the check arrived. Inside our marriage, his salary became capital, his risk became ambition, and my income became household money before it ever touched my account. I paid utilities, groceries, dry cleaning, and the quiet parts of life, while Graham called his spending building our future whenever I asked for numbers. The numbers were never abstract to me, because I watched them leave our accounts while my shoulders ached from hauling sample books upstairs. Graham put community money into a concierge app that folded, a private cocktail concept that never opened, and a membership lounge no lender trusted. By the time I stopped asking for explanations, Born Mui Haing Dola had disappeared behind words like timing, opportunity, and partner failure. He never said mistake, and that missing word told me more than the receipts he kept buried in his laptop folders. Celeste Arden entered my marriage through Thursday nights that started sounding too rehearsed. Always client retention. Always late dinner. Always one more hotel issue. Graham's shirts came home with a different laundry fold. His phone began sleeping face down, and his calendar filled with meetings named cleanly enough to hide dirt. When I asked if he was seeing someone, he laughed without looking nervous and told me I spent too much time finding stains in fabric. That was the sentence that changed the room. Because he did not defend our marriage. He insulted the work that had been feeding it. I did not confront Celeste, follow Graham, or give him the ugly scene he probably would have used later as evidence of instability. I began saving statements, photographing receipts, and writing dates in a notebook I kept beneath rolls of discontinued upholstery trim. Celeste was not a confused woman waiting for truth. Her messages later showed she knew exactly whose marriage she was helping dismantle. Make her feel small enough to sign, she wrote. And when April Maddox eventually read those words, I remembered every quiet night. I chose paper over pleading. Graham mistook my silence for surrender because men like him rarely recognize preparation when it wears work clothes. The letter from Elaine Porter's estate arrived on a Tuesday, folded inside a cream envelope that looked too expensive for ordinary bad news. I almost left it on the entry table because legal mail has a way of making your body tired before your mind knows why. Elaine had been my mother's older sister, a woman my family described as difficult whenever they meant independent and inconveniently private. She ran Briarloom Supply House for 30 years, selling custom upholstery, fire-rated drapery, and hotel linens to people who never noticed the women measuring seams. I opened the letter in my workroom. Between a stripped wingback chair and a roll of moss green velvet ordered for a private club downtown, the first page named me as beneficiary, but the words did not land until I saw Saumui Tarmfantrum membership, interest, in Briarloom Supply House. Beneath that, the estate attorney listed Motrio Hai Trum Tarmuingin Dola in distributions held in probate escrow, pending final release into an account under my name only. I sat on the floor because my knees stopped pretending they were available, and the chair beside me looked steadier than I felt. Briarloom was not lottery money, not a mansion, not some shiny miracle Graham could dismiss as luck and try to touch with both hands. It was a company built from bolts of fabric, supplier relationships, vendor contracts, and the same stubborn trade knowledge he had treated like background noise. The schedule attached behind the letter listed hospitality clients across Texas, including the boutique hotel group where Graham managed regional operations. I read his company's name twice, then a third time, because the room had gone too quiet around one ugly possibility. April Maddox saw it before I said it, her finger resting on the client schedule, while her expression stayed professionally still. Do not put $1 of this near a joint account, she warned, and I nodded before she finished explaining separate property under Texas law. Inheritance stayed mine if I kept it clean, traceable, and untouched by the marriage accounts Graham had treated like loose change with my name erased. April asked for dates, renewal contracts, email hints, anything showing when Graham may have connected Elaine, Briarloom, and me before filing. I told no one, not my mother, not the women at the workroom, and certainly not the man sleeping beside me with his phone face down. I kept repairing fabric, kept answering client calls, kept letting Graham explain real money to me while his hotels were paying invoices to my aunt's company. The humiliation became easier to carry once it had a paper trail, because every smug correction from him had started sounding like a man speaking over evidence. He did not know I had already hired counsel, opened a separate account, and placed Elaine's letter where his hands would never reach. Weeks later, I asked Elaine's estate attorney why she had chosen me, when half the family thought I barely existed outside work clothes. He adjusted his glasses and told me Elaine had watched me restore a torn chair at a family gathering while everyone else complained about the stain. She said you were the only one who worked with your hands and never apologized for it. He said, and I had to look away. For the first time in years, my hands did not feel like proof that I had been left behind. They felt like the reason someone had remembered me. Graham filed for divorce 3 weeks after the first email April later pulled from Discovery. And he did it with the calm of a man already coached. He found me in the kitchen after work, hotel badge clipped to his belt, and announced we had grown in different directions. I wiped fabric dye from my thumb with a dish towel and felt no surprise. Only the confirmation of a schedule reaching its date. Celeste had helped him rehearse the sentence, because nothing in his voice sounded spontaneous. I did not ask about her, did not ask why, and did not give him the scene he could later describe as instability. I only looked at Graham and answered, "Send everything to April." And the quick blink told me he expected begging instead. The first settlement meeting took place in Bennett Rhodes's office, where the chairs were low and the lighting made everyone look accused. Bennett described my work as limited income craft labor, then slid over an offer giving me $1,000 a month. Graham watched the paper cross the table with the expression he used when hotel staff solved problems before guests noticed them. April read the offer once, asked for it in writing, and let the silence sit long enough for Bennett to mistake restraint for fear. When he added a non-disclosure clause covering marital conduct, April's pen stopped moving, and that pause became the first warning he ignored. Celeste waited near the elevator. Her badge clipped to a designer coat like she wanted me to know. Access had replaced shame. She stepped close enough for her perfume to reach me and murmured, "Some women don't know when the room has moved on without them." I looked at the badge, then at her polished smile, and understood she was not hiding because she believed the ending had been purchased. I walked past without answering, because a woman eager to perform power usually gives better evidence if you let her finish. That night, April received screenshots showing Celeste had written, "Push before probate closes." And Graham had answered, "Bennett thinks she'll take the mercy offer." April moved quickly, requesting Graham's communications about Briarloom, the renewal, the settlement timing, and messages involving my inheritance. Bennett delayed, objected broadly, then sent partial files so heavily redacted they looked more nervous than protected. April filed a motion to compel, and the court ordered production because paperwork does not become private strategy because Graham disliked Discovery. The next batch contained the renewal agreement Graham signed, confirming Briarloom's payment structure while he prepared to call me financially dependent. It also contained Celeste's cleaner cruelty, make her feel small enough to sign, tucked between hotel schedule notes and dinner confirmations. By then I understood they had not merely wanted a divorce. They had wanted me to exit my life at a discount. Graham counted on my exhaustion. Celeste counted on my humiliation. And Bennett counted on a woman with work hands not reading vendor language. Every document April organized made the trap clearer. They had nailed themselves to the record, one confident message at a time. Bennett opened the hearing by making Graham sound organized, reasonable, and exhausted by a wife who had refused a generous exit. He described our marriage as financially simple, our assets as limited, and my work as modest restoration labor with inconsistent income. Graham sat beside him with his shoulders squared, wearing the calm expression of a man who believed the hard part had already happened. Celeste sat behind him, close enough for me to see her hand resting over her phone, waiting for the ending she had helped schedule. April let Bennett finish because interruption would have given him a place to hide, and she preferred documents with no room for performance. When Judge Fairchild asked whether both sides had reviewed all financial disclosures, Bennett answered yes before Graham looked at him. April rose with the file already open and asked the court to review Exhibits D through H before accepting any statement about limited assets. The judge nodded, and I felt Graham turn slightly toward me, as if suspicion had finally reached him later than fear. Judge Fairchild read the probate certification first, then the Briarloom membership transfer, and the courtroom became careful in the way rooms become careful around fire. Mr. Whitlock, did you sign the vendor renewal agreement naming Briarloom Supply House as an approved textile supplier for your hotel group? Graham swallowed before answering. Yes, Your Honor. Through operations. Bennett shifted papers that did not need shifting, and Celeste lowered her eyes to her lap. The judge continued. That agreement confirms payment structure and active vendor status while this divorce was being prepared. Graham tried to speak before April did, and that mistake changed the temperature around him. Her inheritance should count. He pushed out, but April placed one hand on the file and kept her voice flat. Inheritance is separate property under Texas law when kept traceable and not commingled. And, Mrs. Knox followed counsel before any funds were released. Judge Fairchild looked at the account records, then at Graham, and the silence after April's sentence did more damage than outrage could have. Then April gave the court Exhibit F, the email Graham had sent from his company account before filing. Judge Fairchild read it aloud without emphasis. If Meredith connects Elaine Porter to Briarloom before decree, our leverage is gone. Celeste's face changed so quickly that even Bennett noticed, and his jaw tightened before he could stop it. The line did not need explaining, because every word carried its own intent, its own date, and its own quiet admission. April moved to the messages next. Not all of them, only the ones sharp enough to prove the pattern without drowning the room. Celeste had written, "Make her feel small enough to sign," and Graham had answered with the settlement timing Bennett later defended. Judge Fairchild asked whether those messages came from produced discovery, and April confirmed they were tied to Graham's disclosures and employer compliance records. Bennett objected to context, but the judge overruled him because the context had been sitting inside their own words. The ruling did not arrive like thunder. It arrived like a door closing in clean legal language. Briarloom and the Moat Triu Haitrum Tar Mungin Dola distributions remained my separate property, and Graham received no claim to either. The court allowed my reimbursement claim for Bornwi Haingin Dola in community funds lost through his unsupported ventures and ordered significant attorney's fees for discovery conduct. Judge Fairchild also directed the final order to note the vendor conflict for compliance review, and Graham finally looked less angry than cornered. Afterward, in the hallway, Graham stepped toward me with the expression of a man trying to buy back a conversation after judgment. "You should have told me," he said, like honesty was something he had been denied instead of something he had buried. I looked at him, then at the courthouse doors behind him, and felt no need to raise my voice. "You knew enough to hide it," I answered. And for once, Graham Whitlock had nothing left to correct. Graham was placed on administrative leave before the week ended, then terminated after compliance reviewed the vendor conflict Judge Fairchild had named in the order. Celeste lost her VIP client access first, then her position, because the messages tied her ambition to a married executive and a pressure campaign against his wife. Bennett Rhodes did not send another insulting letter after the ruling, and April Maddox forwarded the final order with one sentence: "Clean records age better than loud people." I read it twice, then closed my laptop without the old instinct to prepare for Graham's next version of reality. I did not buy a house to prove I had survived him, and I did not chase rumors about where Celeste landed next. I leased a brighter studio near South Congress, with tall windows, locked storage, and clients who paid deposits before my hands touched anything valuable. Briarloom stayed under professional management while I learned quarterly reports the way I had learned fabric. Slowly, by respecting what each line revealed. For the first time in years, money did not feel like something being taken from me while someone called it vision. One morning, I stood alone in the studio with a torn antique chair, my sleeves rolled up, my hands resting over the damaged seam. The same hands Graham had mocked now signed vendor approvals. Approved payroll. Restored heirloom pieces. And opened doors he would never walk through again. I was not saved by Elaine's inheritance. I was recognized by it. And that difference mattered more than Graham would ever understand. He told me to go to hell with those hands. But those hands carried me into a life with my name on the door. Thank you for staying with Meredith's story until the end. Sometimes peace arrives when a woman finally trusts the evidence of her own life. If this story reminded you of someone who rebuilt quietly, leave a comment and share the moment that stayed with you.